So now we're going to segue to a local director of a nonprofit, Ocean Alliance, and Iain Kerr. Many of you have heard of him and probably met him. And he's going to talk to us about whales and climate change and the research and activities that they do. So take it away, Iain.
Well, listen, thank you very much. So you folks know Ocean Alliance, yes, clearly is a local group, and we're not a group that focuses on climate change. But clearly, climate change affects everything. It affects ocean animals, and it affects ocean businesses. Now, Ocean Alliance, we were founded actually in 1971. So we're having our 50th anniversary this year. We actually have one of the longest ongoing studies of any great whale species on the planet, the southern right whale. We're the group that discovered that whales sing songs in the 1970s. And our recordings are even on the Voyager 1 and 2 spacecraft that head up through deep space. And we've been involved in too many sort of movies to note, from The Hunt to Red October to Star Trek, you name it. So we're across the board, but I would say we're what we call a conservation science organization. We don't collect data just to collect data. We collect data to affect change. And clearly we're headquartered here down on the in the Tar and Watson paint factory on the waterfront. One disappointing thing for me, I have to say, is I've been doing this for 30 years. When I started, the major threats to whaling. Now we've got pollution, ship strike, habitat loss, noise pollution, climate change, acoustic bleaching, and it's wow, it's such a tough one. And we're a very visible species. It's almost people love a smoking gun, that's who did it or that's how it happened. And what's happening now is all of these little things are having an effect on the species, and that is affecting multiple species, at a level. So you can't say it's just this or it's just that, which makes wildlife conservation a little bit more challenging. From my perspective, what I'm very interested in is a health assessment of wild animals, okay? Now, most wild animals will not show that maybe they're pregnant or not show that they're unwell, because if they do, they become what's called more bioavailable to predators. So I get a hangnail and I'll let the whole world know, but wildlife, that they won't let you know. So I'm like, how do we know the health of these whales? Well, if you look in the bottom corner there, that's me with a biopsy gun, and I'm about to take a skin sample from this whale. It's about the size of a pencil eraser. But I would say to you, how would you feel if I chased you down the road with a biopsy gun saying, I just want to find out how healthy you are? You'd probably be like, well, that's okay, Iain, So I've been very frustrated by this. And I was in the Gulf of Mexico after the Deepwater Horizon disaster, and I felt like I was playing the world's most expensive game of whack-a-mole, because a whale would appear over here and I'd race over there, and then, the whales would dive and I'd race over there, and that whale would dive. And I'm like, this just isn't working. And what actually then happened was I got covered in this cloud of whale exhalation, exhaled breath condensate. I guess, well, of course, I call it whale snot. And I had a little bit of a look at this whale snot, and I'm like, oh my God, the whales are throwing this priceless information in the air. DNA, hormones, microbiomes, pollutants, ketones. I mean, basically, the whale isn't telling us, but by throwing this biological information in the air, we basically had an opportunity to do a non-invasive health assessment. And here's the issue. With endangered species, you tend to have two camps. And camp number one is don't touch it, don't look at it, don't chase it, don't do anything that might hasten its demise. And then camp number two is, oh my God, we've got to get all the information we can. We've got to, learn everything we can so we can save this animal. we've got to harass it. And Ocean Alliance has come up with camp number 3, whereby we use this very erudite, intelligently named machine, Snotbot, to go and collect, the whale exhalation. And by the way, it's pretty simple there. If you look at, can you see there's 6 Petri dishes on this drone? And basically, we just fly the drone into the Petri dishes, close the Petri dishes up, and we have all of this information about the health of this animal. And I have a little video here, no sounds. Here we go. We'll see Snotbot in action. I want you to tell me if you think I'm harassing this whale. So this is a blue whale. And here you see Snotbot just sliding in. There we go. You've been snotted. And the drone just slowly flies away, and the whale has no idea I've just done a non-invasive health assessment. Now, in case any of you think I'm a talented fellow, I have to admit that blue whales are the largest animals on this planet, and their lungs are the size of a VW. So when a blue whale exhales, it really exhales. So we put a 360 camera on our drone, and check this one out. You've been snotted. I mean, there is snot everywhere. Of course, you have no idea how excited I am when I'm looking at this, but can you see the Petri dishes there, Petri dishes with all the snot on it? I mean, it's just fantastic. And now we are now looking to go to places around the world that are difficult to get to and where we know very little about different species. Because what's going on here, rather than no disrespect to Woods Hole, a $20 million research vessel, I get 5 people in a small boat and a drone. And we've worked in Gabon, in Africa, Argentina, Mexico, Alaska. We've worked all over the world with these drones. And I really think we're democratizing science with these tools that are affordable, field-friendly, and scalable. And by the way, sometimes people say, well, okay, what is your boat like? Well, here we are. Here is Chris catching the drone that I'm bringing home. So this is our research vessel. I think it was $200 a day. There's me back there. Is Britta coming forward? And actually, you'll see you see the snot and all the dishes there. And these are not COVID masks. We're making sure that Britta's snot does not get mixed up with our whale snot. So it's been really quite exciting. And actually, when we look down to the bottom here, there's all these other things that we're now doing with drones. We're doing this thing called photogrammetry. And basically, a fat whale is a healthy whale. And actually, I was just on a recent publication where we were comparing right whales all over the world, actually showing that the northern right whales off our own coast are skinnier than almost any other population around the world. So, okay, why is that? But this talk tonight isn't about Iain's obsession with drones and FLIRBot and EarBot and whatever, but I'm very excited about how these new technologies are opening up access to our oceans. And that really speaks to why Ocean Alliance is here in Gloucester. But I just think that where we're going to be in 5 years with these technologies, I'm hoping we're going to have all sorts of people in Gloucester doing all sorts of studies all over the world without even having to leave home. Many people might say, well, why whales? Why should I care about whales? And I think that's fair enough. You probably saw earlier, though, our little slogan there, which is healthy whales, healthy oceans, healthy humans. I mean, the oceans are the largest mediating force on this planet. The oceans are basically, whether it be climate, pollution, and alas, the oceans are downhill from everything. So our oceans are somewhat becoming our toilet, but it's okay. And when we look at whales, well, believe it or not, well, actually, I should mention this fact here, 70% of the oxygen comes from our oceans, but in actual fact, 2 out of every 3 breaths you take come from the plants that are in the ocean, okay? The phytoplankton, etc. And just quickly here, I have a little climate change piece in there. A great whale sequesters 33 tons of CO2 in its life, okay? A tree will absorb about 48 pounds in its life. So one whale is actually worth between 1,500 and 2,000 trees. But there's more. There's more. And guess what? Oh, wait a minute. Why is my slideshow stopped here? Okay, let's see. Oh, there we go. Here we go. We get into Ian's favorite topic. We've done snot. Now let's get on to poop. Now, if you want to get all technical, we can talk about nutrient flux, carbon flux, waste products, oxygen flux. But let's talk about poop. One thing we all understand is fertilizer. Okay, so much of America's agriculture is dependent on fertilizer. A 50-ton animal will eat 5% of its body weight a day. So that means it's probably pooping around a ton a day. Okay. So imagine that, millions of whales around the world pooping a ton a day. And what are they doing? They are fertilizing that phytoplankton. Okay. And that's what it is. They are fertilizing that phytoplankton. And then when we go to nutrient flux, that's talking about whales catching species down deep and then bringing them to the surface. And then the whole biomass, when an animal dies, there's a whale fall and you get deadfall carbon. But the whales are actually sort of ocean earthworms, if you like. And, commercial fisheries are incredibly dependent on whales. And I'll throw something out. I don't have the scientific proof here, but I think one of the reasons why fisheries collapsed in this area is because we killed off all the whales. There were millions of whales that were feeding the plankton, and the plankton were feeding the carnivorous plankton, and the carnivorous plankton were feeding the small fish, and so on and so on and so on. So, you could then say, I keep losing my slides here. You could then say, well, how much is a whale worth? And if you want, you can actually go online, and the International Monetary Fund just actually did a scientific paper on how much is a whale worth, and millions of dollars. And it's thought that the whale population worldwide is valued in the trillions. And again, fishing industry, whales contribute to the food web and so on, the phytoplankton. I've talked about this, but I'm in this business because I love whales. I love a lot of whales more than I love some people. I'm sorry to admit that, but that's okay. And I don't want to live in a world without whales. That's my choice. But if you're not a whale lover, that's fine. I don't care. It's okay. We've all got to have our passions, but I think we need to understand the importance of these animals in our oceans. And I hate to say it, but when I look at sort of spaceship Earth or planet Earth, a friend of mine is an astronaut. When I look at planet Earth, we're sort of hurtling through space. And I sometimes think, humans, we're the people that are sitting in first class having champagne and food and creating waste. Meanwhile, the worms and the plankton and the fish, they're doing all the work to create this healthy ecosystem in which we live. So again, if you don't mind, healthy whales, healthy oceans, healthy humans. And one thing I think people clearly in Gloucester understand is an anchor chain. You take a link out of an anchor chain, that anchor chain doesn't work anymore. And I think one of the biggest discoveries in the 20th century in the field of biology is actually the interdependence of species. When we knock out one funky little fish, that affects that one and this plant and that one. And we're still basically getting to understand this. But I ask you to think, you take a link out of an anchor chain, that chain doesn't work anymore. And what we're learning now, we need that biodiversity. That's why we used to be the Whale Conservation Institute. And now we are Ocean Alliance, because while we're whale experts, we understand the importance of the layers of life and the interdependence of species. And of course, we are just one of those species. And I think the interdependence of species is almost a model now as we're looking for the new blue economy. Because the new blue economy is not just going to be windmills, or it's not just going to be fisheries, or it's not just going to be I don't know. Do you know what I mean? The blue economy is going to be what Gloucester as a community is a master of. You know, if you look at the sort of the creators in Gloucester, from Hammond to Birdseye to Bell, you know what I mean? There are great innovators, there are great thinkers, there's great creators in Gloucester. And I'm really excited to play my own small role in this sort of diverse blue economy that I think Gloucester is blessed with, both our natural harbor, but also our natural natives, as it were, that have made their lives from the sea. So here is the dreadful office I have to go to every day. It's just so bad to have to sit on the waterfront. But basically, here are our buildings, and just a sort of a quick overview. We have about 5 million into the site. And I ask you to bear with me because we're not a fix-up a building group. We're marine mammal scientists, which is already a tough job. And by the way, let's take on another tough job, which is sort of fixing up these buildings. So we're not moving fast, but we are moving. And actually, if you see at the bottom, it says buildings A and B there. If you saw the Gloucester Times last week, for the first time in 41 years, those buildings now have heat. Okay. So basically, all of the brick buildings are done, and we're now moving on to the next phase. And if you look at, so here's phase one, where over $1 million was spent in just site remediation and cleanup. I must have been crazy when we bought these places. Anyway, crazy good. But phase two is just finishing now with our robotics club, you know, our docks sort of bringing in other research vessels, et cetera. And we're now moving into phase three, which is really exciting. And guess what? I get to throw in some climate change with phase three, because two of the buildings on site had to get taken down. They were falling down, and we were instructed to take the buildings down. These are these two buildings you see on the drawing on the left, to the left of the sort of the manufacturing building. And I've been struggling with wanting to put those buildings up and maintain the massing and the sort of the nature of this site. But guess what? With climate change and with flood zones, they said the buildings have to be 12 feet above grade. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the whole sort of look of the paint factory is going to be gone. And then I think somebody made a joke out of this, and I said, let's do it. Our plan is to put these buildings back on a barge. So guess what? We're going to have a climate change future-proof floating innovation center. All right. And if I can raise the funds, it should be the first one, not just in New England, but on the East Coast. So once again, Gloucester will be taking the lead. But think about this. These buildings, I'll never have to worry about flooding. I'll have a basement because, you know, it's on a barge. And I think it's an interesting idea. I will admit I'm a European. It's been well adopted in Europe. But in New York City, there's a 600-person jail in a barge. So this might be one of the ways to even deal with sort of waterfront buildings in the future, sort of put them in their own sort of concrete box that can float if there is a flood. So anyway, that's the next step. So if you thought I was crazy before, don't worry. Crazy continues, but I'm hoping that you know, I have some good friends in California, the Annenberg Foundation, who bought this property for us. And what I'm going to be doing in 2021 is trying to find from somewhere in New England a lead gift. And I have to tell you, in the $1 million to $1.5 million range. And I think if I can get that lead gift from Massachusetts, I think the Annenberg Foundation will follow. I think it's too much for me to ask them right now to lead, since they've sort of led the way so far. And if you see, by the way, on the bottom, see these sort of two barges. So the buildings will actually be on spuds. So they won't be rocking all the time. And actually, if there's a big storm, you actually can then lift the buildings out of the water, because it's typically wave action that does the damage, not wind action. Anyway, what can you do? And you know, I had a great sort of experiment with my robotics club's kids once, and actually my daughter. And I said, what is the one thing that you have control of? What do you control and nobody else control? And one of the kids said, the TV remote. And I'm like, well, I wasn't actually thinking of the TV remote. But you know, the one thing we all control, our own mind. This is our mind. We make the choices. We can't pretend, well, I got it. You know what? Whether we do it subconsciously or consciously, we are responsible for the decisions we make. And I promise you, as an environmentalist, I fly out of around the world. I've come to terms with my own hypocrisy. It's tough to live in this world and not be a hypocrite every now and then. I've drunk out of a plastic bottle. I haven't recycled something. But I think what Alison will tell you is the value of just doing something. You know, once a week, so I'm going to make this recycling week and I'm going to do a little bit more, or I'm going to make it cleanup week, or I'm going to do a little bit more, or I'm going to learn a little bit more about Sierra's 100 Club. Do you know what I mean? And I think, because I think the people that try to make everything black and white, you fail. You say, I'm going to go cold turkey, and then you just can't do it. So I just really believe in the value of controlling that one thing and doing the one thing you can do, which is be the change. So I think with that, thank you very much for your patience. And I will stop my screen share here. If I can find it. There we go.
Well, thank you, Iain, so much. We've got some questions. I'll just ask you. One person asked about, Elaine Starrett's daughter was asking about entanglement. What are the entanglement issues in Gloucester with the right whales and fishing?
Oh, man. Boy, I wish you hadn't asked me that question.
You don't have to give a long answer. Just say, is it something we're working on? Is it there? Is it significant?
Yeah, it's actually not something we're working on. We actually are doing photogrammetry with northern right whales, where we're trying to see how healthy they are and so on. We're not working on the entanglement issue. I actually think this is a federal government issue, and I think the federal government need to step up to the plate and I think take funds out of the Magnuson-Stevenson Act and support Gloucester fishermen and New England fishermen so they can afford to buy new gear to deal with the problem. The fishermen should not have, this is not their problem. Do you know what I mean? I think it's a federal problem, but I don't know, Safathia, I'm sure she agrees, but it is a big problem. And, fishermen know more about the oceans than anybody else, but it's a tough one because 80% of all northern right whales actually show entanglement scars. So, but we're all of us, we're up to the challenge. I appreciate everyone being here and I appreciate the discussion. And I'd love it if someone had a simple question. And certainly, yes, I can actually tell you, the easiest way to get hold of Ocean Alliance is info, INFO, @whale.org. And you guys can share that. You don't necessarily need my email because different people do different things at the organization. But I see there's a question here from Peter Parsons with directions to microplastics. Man, I mean, you know what? I honestly think with microplastics, it's back to just doing something again, Peter. Do you know what I mean? The reality is, over the last year, how people have recycled more, collected more. I mean, people are using, here's my water glass and here's my coffee mug. Do you know what I mean? Just these simple actions. I mean, I'll just say quickly, when I talk to school kids, I say, hey, kids, are you used to seeing honeybees? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, do you see honey in the supermarket on the shelf? And they say, yeah. I say, you know where that comes from? That honey comes from millions of bees carrying a tiny little thing so small you can't see it, but they make the change. If, and Alison was there, but if everybody just did one more thing a month, we would change the world. So I'll shut up now. I can talk forever, but thank you all. I really appreciate the invitation here.
Thank you so much. This has been very helpful for many people learned a lot, I think.
And actually, I would encourage people to come down to the paint factory after the COVID situation has been dealt with. Thanks again, Dick.
Thank you. Thank you.